And there he sold the dummy with a knee injury. Edmundhausen, he's going to get more. This is unbelievable.
Welcome back, SuperCoach365 podcast. We're teaming up again tonight, Ryan Selvage, Tommy Hudson, to talk all things number 9. Plenty of hookers to get through, and we're going to chat about 10 of them, Tommy. And speaking of that, seems to be one name on everybody's lips, though, when you're picking a hooker.
I think so. I mean, we'll get into who we're talking about soon. I think if you listen to our first episode of the year the other night, I probably alluded to who I was pretty keen on, but there's a lot of good options out there, and I think in the hooker spot, a lot of people like to play a cheap option too, so we'll probably explore those as well.
Yeah, so stick around for that. We're going to chat up to 10 hookers, as we say. We're going to break them down in terms of their guns or next best, as we've sort of categorised them here. Who can improve, some cheapies, and maybe even a couple to avoid as well. As you alluded to there, mate, this is our second episode back for 2023. To any of those who have missed the first one, be sure to head on over to YouTube or Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you can get us, and might take the opportunity now to give ourselves a little plug. We're going to be running out content thick and fast over the next month or so, leading into the trials, so no better time to subscribe or follow, like, across the socials as well. Just search at SuperCoach365. So obviously coming up, we're going to talk hookers. We've already said that, but we'll get into a couple of questions from our listeners as well. And Tommy, we may as well start with a bit of news, because there's plenty of it. And since we last spoke, and it was only a couple of days ago, we sat here, we spoke about prices and gave some specific numbers around it. But the prices have changed on us. They've gone up slightly, but it looks like it's gone up in even increments. So probably not too much damage done to super coaches.
No, it was a unexpected price rise. I don't think any of us had sort of had that on our radar. I thought the prices they'd come out with in the team picker would have been the ones that they run with throughout the year. But as you've done the research, 14% it has gone up by. I think you said this. I don't know if this is actually why, but are they trying to get it in line with the actual salary cap?
Well, I think so. I mean, I can't imagine any other reason why they would have. In saying that, though, I think the salary cap now, as it is in SuperCoach, is around 11.6 million or thereabouts. Could be wrong, but I think it's around that mark. And the collective bargaining agreement, the dispute which rolls on between the NRL and the Players Association, I think they're aiming closer to 12. So I don't know. Make of it what you will. It doesn't really add up for mine. For what it is worth, for those who don't have gold at the moment, I think we were working off a dollars per point previously of around 9,190. It's gone up. That number now, that magic number, is 10,526. So essentially what you do with that is you take that number, 10,526, you times it by their last year's average, and that will give you their new price. So I think for Ryan Pappenhausen as the top priced player, around 950,000, you'll be able to work backwards from there for anyone else, or just spend the $20 and get gold. It's probably easier to do that.
I think if you're a desperate player and you're desperate enough to listen to us, it's probably worth the $20, to be honest. But that is a good way of sort of working out who is value and who isn't, I think. Another thing that's come out in the last few days is, or an article, I think it was this morning, of the ownership percentages so far in the team picker. Yeah. And I'll let you take us through some of them. I think most of them were not too surprising, but what were your early takeouts from that?
As a tried and tested, rusted on Dolphins fan, it pleased me to see that there were 4 Dolphins inside the top 20 most popular players. To be honest, it's purely at their price. It's something that we're going to say time and time again in this preseason, purely at the price. But the Hammer, obviously, Val Meninga, Val Tafade, Isaiah Katoa and Ray Stone, I think they're all under about 300,000, maybe Hammer slightly just over that, but all in all, popular Dolphins. And again, they're going to be some cheap players at the club if they can get a run, particularly those middle 2 names there, Val Tafade and Isaiah Katoa. They're going to make serious cash, you think, because they've got talent in spades. They just need to get it go.
Yeah, I guess, a lot of the casual NRL fans wouldn't really know a lot of these people from Redcliffe, the Dolphins. I won't offend you. But if you do know, that sort of research is going to be invaluable with this extra team coming in. Just having a look at some of the other people. So Josh Schuster was the most popular so far, 76.2%.
Yep.
Doesn't surprise me given that he's going to start in the halves for Manly and he's 240k. So he's really hard not to have in your team, and he's a dual player as well. And then Cleary was the next, which is not surprising. Brandon Smith, Charles Cook-Lockstad at 4 was odd. I thought I was going out on a limb picking him the other night, but clearly a lot of the game has.
I think there's a bit of value there. People like playing players who fullback in real world NRL in the CTW slot. Anyway, we'll get into that in full, maybe a little bit later on, closer to the preseason, or at least you'll hear us talk about who's the most owned players once the game opens up around fortnight's time from now. And a couple of those names will figure prominently tonight, not least, we may as well say it, Harry Grant. He's on plastered all over the YouTube tile that you would have seen, the social medias. If you're picking a hooker, it's hard to go past. Before we get into hookers, though, very quickly, and we have to touch on this. Tommy, you've put this together. You're like the magistrate's right-hand man here. You've put a list of court appearances in order.
Well, it's pretty sad that we have to do this, but when I picked Leilua in my initial team, you reminded me that he's actually facing assault charges, which is quite relevant. And just digging a little bit deeper, he's currently stood down under that no-fault policy. So if circumstances don't change, he won't be playing to round 12, which is probably going to deter you from putting him in your side. It also opens up a spot in the second row. And I thought of Helam Lukey, but he is also still injured. I think he had an ACL at the end of last year. So there's definitely a spot there. I think you mentioned Mitch Dunn as one option. But yeah, they could be without Leilua for the start of the year. Just quickly as well, Talatau Amone is likely to miss parts of this season. I think Jaden Sullivan's tipped to get the 6 jersey. I think you've had raps on him over the last few years, having watched him in New South Cup and coming through the grades.
News to me, mate. I don't know if I don't know. I mean, again, it's purely one of those players.
Yes, go on.
No, go on.
I'm thinking of the Guru. He always talks about Bud Sullivan, and I was just thinking you did. But either way, he has some raps on him, and this might be his chance, to partner Ben Hunt, a player of his stature in the halves, could be his chance.
Guru might be offended by that, or he might take it as a compliment. I mean, we're both running the beard and such. Anyway, Joshy Curran, as you say there, another one, he's pleaded not guilty. I don't know, we don't want to get bogged down in all this stuff, but it is important to consider this, isn't it, this time of year, because like you made the mistake the other day of picking Leilua. If you're not up with all this news and not knowing of when these players are expected back, you could make the mistake. Obviously, we're going to get to Team List Tuesday. Those names won't be there, but it is going to play a role in how you construct your team and the prices around those other players. You got anything else for us, Tommy, on the news front?
Nah, my core reporting is finished there, so let's get into the content.
Right. Court is now out of session. Let's talk some hookers, and we've already mentioned his name there, Harry Grant. We're starting at the top of the board with hookers. It makes sense because obviously, when you're picking your team from top to bottom, the hooker slot is at the top. And Harry Grant at $816,000 or thereabouts, $816,500. He is 36.8% owned as we go to air tonight, and I only expect that number to rise, to be honest. He's the 13th most owned player, as you see here on your screens, and he has a pretty good start to the year in games against the Eels, the Bulldogs, and the Titans.
Really good start, and then the Tigers in round 4, so a nice start there compared to some of the other hookers we'll get into shortly. Also a nice finals run. Panthers, Raiders, Dragons, Titans. Not too bad at all, and you'd have to expect the Storm to be firing at that end of the year. I'm very keen on him. I made no secret of that the other night. He was the first player I picked. I just think last year, 78 average, and now he has no hectic cheese. Brandon Smith there, sort of, not that he hurt his minutes, but he was always just a presence there that could relieve him if he needed to. Now I don't think there's any excuse, and Grant should be playing 80 minutes pretty much every week, you'd think.
He'll go close. I think the thing about the Storm is you often see it when they go up by a margin, and it is often Jerome Hughes and Harry Grant. Usually Munster stays out there, and Pappenhausen, when he's fit, he doesn't come off either. But Grant and Hughes are the two which often do earn an early shower. By that point, he's probably scored 100 SuperCoach points anyway. It doesn't really matter. Tyrone Wishart, a name which has played at dummy half in the past. I think they were in fact grooming him to play as a utility number 9 last year, so he could spell him, but as I sort of said there, if Wishart's on the field at number 9, Harry Grant's probably already done his job. I want to talk about what makes him so good, though, and I guess different to a lot of the other names we'll speak of tonight is his ability to not only churn out a consistent score, but also that ceiling to go big as well. He scored 90-plus points in 6 of 20 games last year, and others around him at that price point or slightly below it, they just can't stack up to that, can they?
No, exactly right. There's a lot of high-scoring hookers, but there's no one really with the ceiling that Harry has. He has a ceiling of a half or a fullback almost, and that's obviously very helpful in all forms of Supercoach, particularly probably draft. If you could get him early, have him as a captain option every week, you'll put yourself in good stead. But in Classic, I don't think he's ridiculously priced at 8.16. I don't think that's too much at all when you consider the players around him, and I just have a good feeling about the Storm myself as well, and I think he'll be the beneficiary of a better season down there in Melbourne.
Yeah, so comparatively, Damien Cook only scored 90 plus in 4 of 20 games last year. Reece Robson, a player who I think can improve upon this number, 2 of 24 times in games last year did he score 90 plus. So again, just backs up what you're saying there. And he's on an upward trajectory as well. He's the Australian number 9 or number 14 with Ben Hunt. They sort of mixed that role up at the recent World Cup. But in 2020, I think he was around 70 points per game. 2021, back at Melbourne from the West Tigers, he was 74 or 75 points per game, 78 points per game last year. The decks are being cleared. You said Harry Grant gets a full go at it now that Brandon Smith is gone. So there's no reason why that can't be 80 or 85 if Melbourne can get on a roll.
Yeah, it does just feel like a perfect storm, pun intended. The trajectory is going up the last few years. Like you said there, the biggest factor, which was hurting his minutes, is now gone.
Yeah. And
we're, like I said before, we're pretty keen on Melbourne this year to have a good year. I think we said there was a bit of a fairy tale about it if Bellamy was finishing up. So I don't think, and with their good runs as well at the start and end of the year, I just think he's almost a must-have.
Yeah, the numbers speak for themselves, don't they? And you called that must-have status very early last year. You're doubling down on it again this year. Now let's just rewind the clock, because if this was 2018 preseason, we might be saying the same about this man. Of course, I'm speaking of Damien Cook. This time, though, last year, we weren't saying that. He went on to shock us all. 20 games last year. He strung it together at a 75 points per game average. Pretty impressive from a bloke who was 30 at the time. He's now 31 or will turn 31 this season. But suddenly, Damien Cook, he's just defying Father Time himself, and he's back right in the conversation right alongside Harry Grant.
Yeah, it was a really good comeback year for Damien Cook last year. He only averaged 66 on SuperCoach in 2021, and he wasn't really at his running best. I think a lot of people put that down to Wayne Bennett maybe not giving him the license to run around the ruck area, but
yeah,
he was back with the license last year, 75 average, as we mentioned there. I think there'll be a time this year where Cook is very, very relevant. The nature of Souths, they really do get on those rolls down that left side. Cook starts it through the middle with Cam Murray. So I think you just got to sort of pick your run where you think Souths will go well, and then maybe you can cash in on Damien Cook.
Yeah, I'm not sure that run is in this first month of the competition, though. We said it when we were speaking about Latrell the other day. We'll say it again. The first couple of weeks here, away to Sharks in round 1, then away to Panthers. That is just a 5-day turnaround as well, so not easy going to the home of the champs after you've just played the Sharks at down there at Shark Park. Then away to the Roosters, home to Manly, and then home to Storm. So that, I mean, if you're looking across the competition, that would have to be the most difficult first 5 weeks, you would think.
Yeah, and I think it was similar last year for South. They had a very hard start. When you compare it to Grant's run that we just spoke about at the start of the year, and Grant is only $26,000 more than Cook, it's really hard to start with Damien Cook if you're only starting with one gun hooker, because that start is just, it's terrible. You can only play what's in front of you, and they've got a very hard start. He could play as good as he wants. He probably still only average 60, you'd have to think. So that does make it really hard. And then something you'll touch on in a sec, he's not even there for the grand final later in the year.
Yeah, so, I mean, for me, it doesn't make sense to play with Damien Cook for round 1 because, well, from round 1, we've said the first 5 weeks is tough. Round 6 to 12, potentially it gets a little bit easier, but you know he's going to be in the Origin camp if he's fully fit. And if he's not, well, then you don't want him anyway. Has a bye round 16 and round 20, so again, coming off the back of Origin 3, he won't be there. And then if you're looking more through the draft lens, rounds 26, he's not going to be there for the SuperCoach Grand Final. That being said, you wouldn't consider taking him in the first round of a draft, and probably not even now, round 2, round 3, or early round 3. Where does Damien Cook go in a draft league this year? Because hookers, the good ones, they're few and far between. I mean, how far will this guy slip?
I feel like he'll be a forgotten commodity, maybe even by myself as well. I just think people will look elsewhere and forget about him. But factually, he's still very good. 75 average. He had 4 scores over 90 last year, which is as many as Grant had, I'm pretty sure. So there's not much between the two of them, really. Everyone is talking about Grant, including myself. But if you take out the good run that the Storm have at the start compared to South, there's not much between them, in all honesty.
All right, I've been a little bit negative here about Damien Cook. What's the positive? Because, again, truth be told, he's still one of the best hookers in the game. There are a couple of knocks on him from a SuperCoach perspective. But as you sort of said there at the start there will be a time when he is relevant. Looking at this draw, that could very well be from around round... Well, I'm looking here. When would that be? Potentially round 6 from that point. They have the Bulldogs, round 6. Dolphins, round 7. Tough game again, round 8, though. They have Panthers. So twice they play Panthers inside the first 2 months. Away to Broncos, away to Storm. Then it's just about Origin. So maybe there is no good run there.
And then he doesn't play the grand final around 26.
Yeah.
So, and then you've got Origin through the middle, like you said. So, from a fixture point of view, it is hard to make a case for him. As good as he's going to be, I'm sure. It's just hard to pinpoint a time when you really do want him. I mean, the Storm, you said their buy is in round 9, so Grant will be out that week.
Yeah.
But South still have hard games around there from what you were just saying. So, yeah, we don't sound like we're too keen on Damien Cook overall, do we?
No. One man that we are more keen on, and I'll put my hand up and say I'm leading this charge, is Reece Robson. Speaking about South's hard run, the Cowboys, it's polar opposites for them. Reece Robson, we've got him here in the category of next best. So they were your 2 guns from last season, but your next best, who can improve upon last year and potentially challenge to sit in that gun status at the start of 2024. Reece Robson, he has to be in the conversation here. Just pulling out some numbers here. 64 points per game last year from 24 games. But when he is playing 80 minutes, which we're hoping and fingers crossed that he does play more 80-minute games next season, or this season coming up, he averages 70.2. So that, I mean, if you're averaging 70 as a hooker, that's certified gun territory for mine.
Yeah, it's not far off the elite players we've just spoken about in Grant and Cook. So, this time last year, I probably wouldn't have expected us to be talking about Reece Robson third as an option at hooker in a classic competition.
Yeah.
But numbers don't lie. Last year was excellent. If the Cowboys can repeat what they did last year, which I think is a little bit of an if, but if they can, he'll be going huge again. I think you've mentioned a couple of times their great run to start the year, which is another reason to start with him. The only thing I would say is this 80-minute stat. What about Jake Granville? Coming in at age 34, is he going to be the fly in the ointment?
Geez, I hope not. I really hope not. I think he just always seems to lurk around there. Even if it's 18th man, just seems to find a way into this Cowboys squad, which is concerning. So that's the only negative that I would have about Reece Robson. I think the fact that Cotter's now transitioned from a backup number 9 to a genuine even prop or 13, I don't think Cotter's an issue. Granville obviously is for as long as he's around. We'll say it again. They have 16 games in Queensland, only 8 games out of the Sunshine State. Finals run, I mean, we'll talk finals soon, but that first 8 weeks, we'll say it very quickly here. Home to Raiders, away to Broncos, home to Warriors, home to Titans, away to Bulldogs, home to Dolphins, away to Warriors, home to Knights. It doesn't get much better. He could average 80 after 8 weeks.
He could. And, what is he, 130k cheaper than Harry Grant? We already said Cook's got a hard start to the year, and he's 100k more than Robson himself. Robson looks the next best option. I have to agree with you, to be honest. I think you're going to go with Robson to start the year. Yep. I would almost consider it too. You know, saving a little bit of money there, enough money that you could really use it in other places, and you're probably not losing too much if you're going off last year's numbers.
A couple of the other podcasts, they're slow. I think they're listening. They must be, because slowly they're changing their tune for the first time ever. Apparently Harry Grant's left the SC Whisperers team, and the SuperCoach Experience guys, they're saying the same. They're all on the Robson train. I'm driving it. Let's leave that there for Robbo, I think, before I get too hard over Reece Robson. Let's move on to Api Coruscant, because, look, as good as he is, again, another Origin hooker, there will be question marks around Api's SuperCoach performance this year, because he's going from the Premiers to the Wooden Spooners, and more importantly, what is the style of play that the Tigers play with this year? What's their DNA now? New coach and very much a new look team.
Yeah, it's an unknown commodity, I think. You couldn't say it's a positive that he's leaving, the Premiers to a team that has run last a fair few times, or at least down the bottom of the ladder for the last 10 years, really. So he is going to have to kind of reinvent himself a little bit. He'd be very used to playing, with the likes of Cleary and Luai, and he has to try and probably have a bigger hand at the West Tigers. Could that, possibly help his scoring if he's having to be more of one of the main players in their attack? That's maybe a point for him. Yeah,
he probably runs the ball a bit more, doesn't he? Because he doesn't have Cleary, drilling into his right ear, or Luai on his left. The halves there will be, we think, Brooks on the left and Dewey on the right. If Coruscant sees something, he's now, a veteran and elder statesman in that team. He's got the runs on the board to back it up in, back-to-back premierships there at Penrith. If he wants to pick up the ball and run, I mean, who are those two, or who is anyone else in that squad to tell him no, he can't or he shouldn't? So I want to think, it reminds me of when he was at Manly, and he burst onto the scene. I'm just looking here at his SuperCoach numbers. They don't really back that up. Way back in 2018 or 2017 rather, 56 points per game, around that sort of mark. He will be better than that this year. Last year he averaged 63 points per game, and in the premiership year before that, 2021, 55 points per game. The grand final year, way back in 2020, 66 points per game. He's probably going to hover around that 60 points per game mark, won't he?
He will, but I don't know if that is good enough to justify the 660k price tag, really, when you can just pay a little bit more and probably get an elite hooker with much more chance of going big, perhaps. I would say, though, something that does drag down his numbers is the fact that in the last 2 seasons, he's only played 80 minutes 11 times, so he's often was being subbed for Mitch Kenny. When he did play 80 minutes, he averaged 69, which is getting basically 70. He's close to the elite numbers we're talking about.
Yep.
Maybe at West Tigers, he will get the opportunity to play 80 minutes.
Yeah, so that 69 points per game that he did when he did play 80 minutes last season, that's an extra 6 points per game on what he's currently priced at. So maybe it's the converse of what we're saying there. He may average between 60 and 70, but don't be shocked if it's sort of right around the mid-mark of that 63, as he sort of did last year. That'd probably be a good result for him going to a lesser team, you have to think. The only other knock there as well is how do they use Will Smith? Again, a new signing at the club, and again, that versatile number 14 type role who could come on and spell Api, or, I mean, looking at this lineup though, Api may very well be the captain, you could think, or he'd go very close.
If I was a Tigers fan, I'd want Api on the field for 80 minutes if he's capable of it, because I don't think Will Smith's bringing much on to the field personally. Yeah. But look, if Api hasn't played 80 minutes much in the past few seasons, maybe he's been brought there to play a solid 60.
Okay, you mentioned they're paying a little bit more for a gun. I want to throw the opposite at you. What about paying about 200 grand less for potentially a gun in the form of Brandon Smith? You see him here on your screen there in the new tricolours of the Sydney Roosters. $478,000 thereabouts for Brandon. New club, potentially a new full-time role there at number 9. He has sort of played in the middle, be it at the front row or in lock previously at the Melbourne Storm, amongst juggling his duties at number 9. He is going to be a very popular pick. You said it at the top tonight. 63.9% owned, the third most popular player as it stands.
How much of that do you reckon is name association? Just seeing Brandon Smith at such a low quote compared to some of the other options and not really digging too deep at the numbers? Because I don't think the numbers really back up the ownership percentage.
Well, that's it. Sort of like what you say there. Are people buying in because, well, there's probably 2 or 3 reasons. First of those being his name's Brandon Smith, and he's a Kiwis number 9. Second of those is new signing, plenty of hype around his move to Sydney, and how will that change his role or his impact at the Roosters. But then is it just the price? Is it just purely that the $480,000 quote where it's more risk to go around him, to not have him, while everyone else is stacking cash, and you're missing out on that as a super coach if you're not running with Brandon?
It's an awkward price because it's neither a cheapie and it's not a gun. You know what I mean? So I don't know. Do you play a gun and Brandon Smith, or do you have Brandon Smith as your hooker and then have a cheapie as well? That's probably a decision people are going to have to make, because I don't know if he's good enough to carry your team at hooker as the main hooking option. But we'll see. As you said here in our trusty notes, 25 tries from 75 games at hooker. That's a try every 3 games. So if he does get into good positions with the ball with the Roosters, that will boost that number up, you'd have to think. And he'll be darting from dummy half, as he loves to do.
Yeah, well, I mean, sorry, I'm going to pull you up here. I said the Roosters haven't had a genuine running hooker since probably Craig Wing. You think of all those years where they had Jake Friend, he was most usually a give and go to Pearce or Maloney. So again, Roosters in their club's DNA, they don't often have a running number 9. I can't think of anyone other than Craig Wing himself. He was the one who had 75 games and 25 tries in that time. So that's 1 try every 3 games. So I'm thinking here, if Brandon's doing that, are we happy as super coaches? If he's scoring a try every 3 games, it's probably looking back to what he did in 2021 when he did average mid-60s. So we probably wouldn't be disappointed with that. There are pros and cons of having him in your team. The pro is that he's a try-scoring number 9.
Well, the reason why I thought that was actually his stat is because you go back to 2021, I think he scored in 9 straight games. Yeah. And that was all just barging over from dummy half. So he's definitely capable of scoring a lot of tries, and that's obviously going to boost his points. There is cons, though, and I'll get into them now, because I have a few for Brandon, to be honest, but I don't think he'll play 80 minutes. He rarely has played 80 minutes in the past few seasons. I think Roosters bought Jake Turpin for a reason. He's no superstar, but he can come on and do a job for 25. Yep. Even Drew Hutchison is probably lingering around there as well.
We spoke about this the other day when the news of Connor Watson's patella tendon injury broke. Naturally you assume it's just going to help Radley, because you think, okay, well, there's one less threat to Radley's minutes. But you're saying, and probably rightfully so, that won't be the case. If anything, it probably just assures up Turpin a little bit more, and Hutchison probably more so. But I think potentially it could. The main beneficiary out of all of this could be Victor Radley. Do you see the merit there? Because I think most often Radley was coming off for Watson. I don't think they're bringing Radley off for Turpin and shifting Cheese to 13. I don't see that happening. I think Turpin's an out-and-out number 9. He'll just come on and spell Brandon. Radley could get bigger minutes.
Yeah, no, I do agree with that, actually. I don't know if Radley's capable of playing more minutes. Probably is, as long as he keeps his temper. But no, that's probably right. I just don't think Smith will get... I don't think he'll be moving to 13 often. I think he's going to be there out-and-out number 9 for now. The other cons I had was they only averaged 45 last year. Obviously different kettle of fish. I don't think the Storm were at their best. Smith wasn't playing great minutes either. Yeah. Maybe he had one eye on this year, perhaps, with the big move coming. So perhaps that is a forgive. And also, he loses the dual status, which I was surprised about. I thought he would still have the 2RF and the hooker, but just a hooker.
Yeah, it certainly hurts. You can't carry him there. The cons as well for Brandon, from a draw sense, is that previously he was a great buy around Origin time because you knew Harry Grant was going, and you knew he was going to get bigger minutes there around Origin time, as the Storm traditionally lost a whole heap of stars. The Roosters, though, looking at this, they have the buy in round 13s and round 19, so twice in that Origin window, as we're calling it, 13 to 19, they're not going to be there. And I think that knocks Turpin as well. We'll get to Turpin a little bit later. This is the can improve segment, just to recap. So, Brandon, we do think he can improve upon that price of $478K. Where that ceiling is, his absolute max price point, we don't know. Not quite yet anyway. No,
it's definitely a risk versus reward with Brandon Smith. Or probably not even much of a risk, really. in terms of you're not going to lose money. I don't think he's going to go low scoring to lose cash at that low base. It's more just, is he going to get you the points you need? When other people are running Cook and Grant and Robson, if Brandon Smith's only churning out of 50, it might be hurting you.
Yeah, it's points versus cash. The age-old SuperCoach head scratcher, that one. Okay, we'll leave Brandon there. Another team in red and blue, not so much white though, the Newcastle Knights. Jaden Brayley. Now, a name that has at times been SuperCoach relevant. And at this price, I'm going to say he will be worth consideration. Whether or not anyone actually pulls the trigger on Jaden Brayley at $607,000 remains to be seen. He finished the last month of 2022. Now, this is what's going to get people's ears pricked. The last month, so the final 4 games of last season, he finished at an average of 71 points per game. Although coming into the new season, he's only priced at 58 points per game. I say here he's probably not one that you'd think of straight away when you're building your classic team. He just doesn't have the big ceiling. And the Knights, they're going to be hard-pressed to make the top 8.
No, all those are fair points. He doesn't have the big ceiling, but he has a big motor. He's going to play 80 minutes every week. And his base stats and just general scoring, he's good for a 60 every week minimum, really, but he's never gone above a 75. So you're going to hang your hat on him. Whether you want that in your classic team or not, when you've got other players who could get 100, I don't know. He's not exactly cheap either at $607,000.
Yeah.
So you're paying a lot for someone who's just going to churn out a good score, not a great score. Maybe in draft comps, he's the way to go.
So compare that with Reece Robson. So Robbo, someone that we've spoken of a hell of a lot tonight, and I think we will continue when we get into the Cowboys throughout the season. Robbo, $678K. Jay Brayley, $607K. So about a $70,000 difference. A discount you'll get there for Brayley. We said last year Robson twice in 24 games went 100 plus. Jaden Brayley has only once. I can't believe this stat. I was trawling through the depths of NRL SuperCoach stats online. He's only once scored 100 plus in his career, which has been 102 NRL games. So at 1%, call it 1%. One every 100 games he scores 100 plus SuperCoach points, and that was way back in round 24 of 2019.
It's a pretty big sample size. Only once in 102 games, so it doesn't fill you with a lot of confidence. And you just have to think, if you're comparing Robson to Brayley, you just have to think Cowboys are going to have a lot better year than Newcastle.
Yeah.
I'd rather be with a Cowboys hooker than a Knights hooker. Much better attacking side. So I just think Brayley's a little bit too expensive for Classic. Okay,
before we round out the last of this can improve bracket, you want to talk about Reid Marnie, of course, another one of those big off-season moves. Brendan obviously highlights that. Appy's probably a close second. Reid Marnie, he's bobbing in for the bronze here, $574,000 from the grand finalists, the Eels, to a team which has contended at the other end of the ladder for most recent seasons, the Bulldogs.
Yeah, I feel like he's going to be a forgotten man, and maybe rightly so. His average last year did drop to 55. It was 13 points down in 2021, and I think this time last year, we were talking him up as one of the key options at hooker, but he really did not kick on and didn't make a lot of sense why. He seemed like he was playing well, but it just wasn't equating to SuperCoach points. My only theory maybe is that, Dylan Brown, Clint Gutherson, Mitch Moses just demanded a lot of the ball there, and Marnie wasn't given a lot of his own, license to roam free. Maybe that will change at the Dogs, maybe similar to Coruscant. A change of environment could help his scoring.
Certainly, yeah. I mean, what about the impact of Burton, though? And there's other big names down that left side, Addo Carr, kick out. Do you think that plays a role? It could actually help his game. You think of Reid Marnie, and when he does have attacking involvements, it's that short crash ball at the line, previously to like a Junior Bolo or a Papali'i, Ryan Madison perhaps. He's going to have those same sort of threats on the Bulldogs' edges. So again, it probably isn't going to hurt him too much having those names outside him screaming for the footy.
You'd like to think not, and I just go back to Jeremy Marshall-King as well. Last year for the Dogs, they're number 9, average 58. He's a good player, but I think Reid Marnie's a class above, and if he can fit into that same position, perhaps he can go a little bit better than even that. Price $574. It's not super cheap. It's kind of in that awkward, not a star, not a cheapie, so it does make it hard to kind of get him, but I do think he'd be a genuine pod for your team.
He's a Queenslander, so we know he likes playing in that, heat of the day. They do have plenty of day games. We said this about the Dogs, didn't we? 18 day games. They only play one night game from round 12 until round 27. There are 3 buys in that period, but only one night game for pretty much the back half of the year. So, again, if he can get front foot footy and get the roll on and start to run a lot more, he could be anything, to quote the guru. He could be anything.
It could be anything. Look, maybe more in draft again, someone that might slip under the radar. Not thinking of him, but he could have a big year. I really do think that.
Rightio, let's move on to the cheapies, and there are going to be a couple of these. Some will be good, some will make money, others probably going to be a very slow burn or potentially become a headache as the season rolls on. I want to talk about one that is one of the more popular players owned to this point. That is a name we mentioned earlier, Ray Stone of the Dolphins. Now, he's coming back off that ACL injury that he suffered against the Storm last year when playing for the Eels. Dual position, second row hooker, so that's why we're talking about him tonight. He is owned here by 25.6% of all super coaches. So people have found him early doors.
They have, and I get why, 100%. I think in a lot of predicted Dolphins teams, they're expecting him to be starting somewhere in that forward pack, in the back row. He's very cheap, obviously, and he can do a job making money, but I don't think he's going to get you any sort of scoring. There's nothing to suggest that. His highest yearly average so far is 31 in 4 years or 5 years of playing NRL. So you're really taking a punt on him, I think.
Yeah, we're looking at him to make 50 tackles a game. That's what it is. Attacking stats are probably going to be few and far between, but if you can, as we sort of say, if you can just get that average up to around 50, straight away you're looking very close to around 500k eventually. How long that takes to be, again, we'll have to wait and see. If he's off the bench, then again, that's probably where he starts to become a headache. Because if he's just around the 25, 30 points per game, we've seen this in previous seasons, haven't we? One who stands out from last year is Andrew Fafita. Different sort of player, but just was forever stuck between 20 and 30 points a game. He just couldn't seem to just get out of that hole.
Yep, and it becomes a big problem when you want to start loopholing and whatnot. You end up copying that score. So you just got to be careful with these cheapies. When they stop making money, get rid of them if they're only making 20 points, because this is going to get in your way.
Yeah. Okay, we mentioned how Reid Marnie has left the Eels. That's opened the door for Josh Hodgson to make way up to Sydney from Canberra. Canberra, a veteran, wasn't he? And a good servant to that club. But again, a fresh start at... how old is this bloke now? He'd be 35 in the shade, surely.
Yeah, 33. I think 34 later in the season. Look, he's a complete unknown quantity. I initially put him in my team in the team picker. Don't know if he'll still be there in 2 months' time, but yeah, I think it's just name association with him, especially being a Raiders fan myself. He was such a good player for the Raiders. He was probably the second best hooker in the comp for a while there. His scoring on SuperCoach was solid. He's usually good for around a 55 to 60, which at this price is great. After all these injuries and years later, is he going to be able to repeat that? It's a big question mark, but you're only paying $385 to find out.
I just want to look here at the Parramatta Eels side. Now, we put this up on our Instagram at SuperCoach365 yesterday. Potentially, in terms of that number 14, who could give him a spell? They got Jacob Arthur here on the bench, and looking through some of the wider squad, you could only probably think Dejan Arce. Obviously, Mitch Rain is there. He's a number 9. But he's been pretty much unsighted at Parramatta for some time. Maybe it is that Hodgson-Rain combination, but even still, you think Hodjo would still probably play 50 minutes. That might be enough to be SuperCoach relevant.
Yeah, it'll just be interesting to see how he fits into the team, because he's capable of playing 80, definitely, as long as his body hasn't completely given up on him, which it might have. But just they have so many cooks in the kitchen now, Para, because Hodgson's almost like a 7 in a way. And they've got Brown, Moses, and Gutho, who are all playmakers in their own right. So how he fits into that, maybe that means he doesn't get high scoring because the other 3 are commanding the ball too much. I don't know. There's a lot of, issues, but there's also some upside, I think, with Josh Hodgson.
Okay, maybe you've got your Raiders goggles on there. I would probably have him in the avoid, just because he is first up, off an ACL. He's not getting any younger. There are a lot of Chiefs there at the Eels. Let's talk some avoids, though, and this is where we're going to go head-to-head on a couple of these as well. So I'm happy to pot Josh Hodgson. I'm also happy to pot Mitch Kenny, $310,000. You can probably throw Sonny Luke into that as well at $234K or thereabouts. Who announces themselves out of those two to take over the role from Appy? You'd probably lean towards Kenny.
You'd have to think Kenny's done his time. I guess the last few years, it seems like he's been on the bench for Penrith for a long time now, just behind Coruscant. And he's done a good job when Coruscant's been off in Origin and things like that. So when I saw Kenny at 310, I was actually pretty excited. But then you dig deeper at his numbers, and as you've pointed out here, you know, he played 60 minutes per game in 2021, which is a good knock, and he only averaged 36. So he might only play 60 this year with Sonny Luke coming to relieve him for 20 minutes. So if he's only churning out those sort of numbers, you wouldn't be thrilled.
What was he doing in 2021? 60 minutes, he's scoring 36. I will say that was the inflated scoring year. So the Panthers, obviously a great team in that year, went on to win the premiership. Maybe he spent half the time standing around while Nathan Cleary was kicking goals.
Just watching.
Or he's doing laps. I don't know. 0.5 points per minute for a hooker, it just doesn't seem right. I'm happy to go around him. I think those two will split the minutes, as you say there. I think as well, Tyrone Peachey could even play a bit of number 9. Anyway, you think he's done his time? You think he's ready for a jersey? I don't.
I think he's ready for a jersey. I think he'll get the run at it for a while, but whether or not that translates into points, it probably doesn't, to be honest.
Rightio, and the last here in our avoid section, the last player that we will speak of tonight before we get to our listener Q&As is Jake Turpin. We alluded to him previously when we were speaking about Brandon Smith. $296,000. If he's there for round 1, number 14 for the Roosters, would you be any part inclined to run a Harry Grant at 816 or thereabouts and have a Jake Turpin backing him up, making some cash, sort of like you would have last year when you had Harry Grant and Chris Randall there?
It was different last year because... Are you saying if Jake Turpin starts or on the bench? Because he's on the bench, I'm not going near him. Chris Randall was starting last year.
Yeah.
Turpin will even make money if he's on the bench. I don't know. The only way I see him becoming a factor is if Cheese or Radley gets suspended, which is a probability, to be honest, at some stage. Yep. And then he'll go in and start at 9. But beyond that, I'm avoiding him. I just don't think he has any sort of value.
Yeah. And again, there, like you sort of say, there are options there around Cheese to play 9 if, for whatever reason, he is injured mid-game or during the week. We saw it as recent as last year. I think Drew Hutchinson started some games at hooker or in the centres. He's very versatile. I don't think he's a premiership winning number 9, Drew Hutchinson. I don't think Jake Turpin is either. I think they're well acquainted there by the time that Cheese gets back to his best, and Radley has played 9 before. I think there's just too many names around him. Will I start with him? No. Will I look to him? Probably not. Again, as we sort of said with Brandon Smith, the Roosters have some shocking buys around the Origin time, and that's the only time when he would have become relevant otherwise. So, Jake Turpin, not for ours.
Yeah, I'm going around him. I think it's a tough category overall, just summing up. Like, as I said, I'm keen on Grant, and I think the credentials of Robson can't be ignored, as you've really pointed out. Cook will do a job at some part of the year. But you get down to these cheaper options, and now I do kind of understand why people are going with Brandon Smith, because he has a lot more legs than other people that are cheap in this category, I think.
Yeah, and hopefully at that price he can put those legs to use. Tommy, let's leave it there in terms of our structure around how we're going to do this podcast tonight. Let's get into a few of these listener Q&As. Love this. It always opens some cans of worms, depending on how many worms there are to be opened. There are a couple of questions here, so we might have to get through these quite quickly. First one here from Kai Ehrman. Mid-range option. I think we've said enough about Brandon Smith tonight. Let's look at some of these other names that you are playing around, probably 400 to 550. Jeremy Marshall-King, Blake Brayley, some names here that we haven't spoken about yet tonight. Blake and the Sharks, they have a pretty good run, I'm led to believe. Jeremy Marshall-King, any love for JMK at the Dolphins?
He was great last year. Complete surprise packet for me. He averaged 58. I was not expecting that. Can he repeat it at the Dolphins? I don't think so, personally. I think mid-ranges, Brandon Smith is the obvious one. Reed Marnie, if you want to reach to 574, could have some upside too.
I think what concerns me with Marshall King this year is they don't buy Cody Nikorima not to give him a run. You know, he's going to be 14. He's a great number 14. There will be a utility option on the bench to cover injuries. I just think that Marshall King, as good as he is, and he can play 80. I don't know if he does. So someone who makes plenty of tackles, he's going to need to be out there for minutes. I don't think the Dolphins will be scoring a whole heap of tries. He was a try scorer, though, at the back end of last year for the Bulldogs. He did score a couple of them.
Yeah, he's a dynamic player, but I think he just suited that Dogs style. They were quite open by the end of the year. Like you're saying there, I'm not sure a Wayne Bennett coach Dolphins are going to be... They're going to be more defensive minded, I'd imagine.
And we saw what Wayne Bennett did to Damien Cook when he was there. He just took that running game right away from him. Another name there, though, Aaron Clark, dual position eligible. We think he's going to play lock, and the Titans have shored up that number 9 area around Sam Verrills. And Chris Randall, of course, has moved from Newcastle to the Gold Coast. So Aaron Clark, he looks a genuine number 13 this year. At the price, there will be some takers. At this stage, I'm not one of them, but I think he's priced at around a 47 point per game average. Dual position player, he's a Kiwi, so he won't be there come Origin time in terms of a Maroons jersey. He could be someone that we start to look to towards round 13 onwards.
Yeah, maybe in that middle part of the year where we're looking to these obscure options. I don't think you could start with him. There's just too much up in the air with the Titans and who's going to play where, but maybe down the track, yeah.
I mentioned round 13 there. I should have said they do actually have 3 of their buys before round 16. That would have to be one of the earliest teams to wrap up their buys. The Titans, buys in round 5, buy in round 13, buy in round 16. So there's just no fluency there for the Titans. We'll see how that impacts them.
Conversely, though, when we get to around 16, we'll be looking to Titans to sort of bring us into the end of the year for feeders and Tinos, maybe.
Yep, great shout. Great shout. Looking here as well, I think they have in their last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 weeks, I think they have 6 home games. So again, that could be an angle as well, playing up there at Seabus Stadium. That question was from Luke Smithson, we should have said. Junior Glover here says starting both Aaron Clark and Brandon Smith a genuine option. Could you go double mid-ranger and go around Grant, Robson, Cook?
I feel like you have to have one of Grant, Robson, Cook. I think you have to have one of those 3. Would you agree or no?
Yeah, I think it'd be a nervous watch anytime the Cowboys and Storm step out, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's too hard, I think. There's just not the ceiling that other players... They don't have the ceiling that those 3 do.
Yeah, you need a bit of luck with Brandon. You need him to score a try every second week. Petit787 again says JMK to average 65 plus. That was his bold prediction. Now, Rugby League Live 5 asked this question. They've since rebranded their Instagram account to @RugbyLeagueRealm. Check it out. They do some good stuff. They're more into the sort of FIFA Ultimate Team style content. Give them a check over at Instagram @RugbyLeagueRealm. He says here, Hodgson is in no way a SuperCoach option. I think this one was targeted at you, Tom. No way is Josh Hodgson an option. Returning from a year off and hasn't averaged 60 plus since 2018. I don't think that's the point, though. We're not asking him to average 60 plus if you are playing with him.
No, I'm not expecting him to. I mean, I'd love to see 50 plus, and I think that's very, very achievable if he's playing north of 60 minutes for the Eels. But, it's just the price, purely at the price, as we say every day. 385,000. He's probably the best player there that's under... Other than Brandon Smith, he's the next best player, I think.
You'd think about it. Okay, another one here says, any love for Marshall King, Riley Milton 4? Yes, I think there's some love. We're not in love with him, but there's a bit of... our hearts are fluttering towards the Dolphins, number 9. Anthony Golden says here, Cheese with the full preseason back at 9. He will be back to Dally M hooker form. I mean, I'm not going to say no.
I'm not saying no either. The only thing that year when he went massive, sorry. The Storm, I think they had the most points scored of any team ever, wasn't it? They had that massive run of 10 games. They scored 40 points.
Yeah.
He was scoring every week. It was just a freak situation. I don't know if it's going to repeat itself.
Will we ever see another year like that? I mean, you think of Tommy Turbo carving up that year. They didn't win the comp, Manly. Storm didn't win the comp. Panthers just timed their runs so well, didn't they? Can you believe they scored, what was it, 40 points in 10 straight games? Is that what you just said?
It was something like that. Like Nico Hines was getting 100 every week. Grant was going big. Cheese was scoring. I think he scored 8 or 9 weeks in a row. So it was just an anomaly. Like maybe he could score a few tries this year, but I don't think he's going to be reaching those heights again, personally.
Rightio, let's skip through a couple of these. Plenty of questions around here. Mitch Kenny, Aaron Clark, Reid Marnie here. This is a bold prediction from NT Outlaw 11. Reid Marnie, Dally M Hooker of the Year. Are you buying those shares?
I don't hate it. I don't know if I agree with it, but I do think SuperCoach option, perhaps.
Adrian Ives says here, year of the Brayley, Jaden and Blake to both finish in the top 5. We probably glossed over Blake Brayley tonight. Anything there that takes your fancy? I think he's got room for improvement in his game. He can probably be a little bit more attacking, but you look at the work that Nico Hines does there, and Matt Moylan even last year found some form. I don't think there's need for Brayley to be too attacking. His service is great, and I think that's just his role in that team.
I think we've been very harsh on Brayley to not mention in this whole podcast because, he's pretty expensive. What is he? 6'17", so he's 50k less than Coruscant, but he averaged 60 last year, which is probably what Coruscant is going to average as well. 80 minutes every week in a team which I think a lot of people are saying the Sharks have another easy run, which they seemed to last year, and it worked well for them. He's only getting older, more experienced, gelling better with Hines and that. We probably are. He's flying under the radar, you'd have to say.
I did do some numbers into pre-season before we sort of sat down and planned out what the year looks like in terms of pre-season content. So I came up with this metric, involvement percentage. So a player's involvement in their team's tries, be it scoring the try, assisting the try, or a try contribution. I put these numbers together. Cody Walker topped the list at 50%. Phenomenal. For the Sharks, Nico Hines was 44%. So that was equal second across the whole league with Ben Hunt, Adam Reynolds. So Nico Hines, his involvement in tries. Would you believe that Matt Moylan, the old legs, they shall not weary, 40%. He was involved, Matt Moylan was involved in 40% of the Sharks' tries. What I'm getting at here is Hines and Moylan, they're all over it. Blake Brayley, while we're on him, he was only 19%. So straight away you see his job isn't to be involved as a creator. It's just to give the ball to Hines and Moylan. They'll do the rest.
Yeah, he's very similar to his brother, isn't he? At Newcastle, really. He's got that big motor, 80 minutes. He'll churn out 60 without issue.
Yeah.
But he's probably never getting above 70, is he?
And when he does, he's probably laid on a try or scored one himself. Yeah, anyway. All right, another one here. Two more. We'll wrap it up after these two. Does Turpin come into play now with the Roosters with Watson going down? We think he's number 14 at best. And probably not too much more.
Yeah, wait and see. But yeah, not to start with. I don't think so, no.
Here we go. This is a fun little one to wrap us up. From the SC Whisperer, we mentioned him at the start. We'll mention him here. We'll be the last one before we wrap this up. What would Mark Riddell average if he was in 2023 if he was kicking goals?
Well, he's actually written 2033, but I'm assuming that's
wow.
a typo because then it's really getting juicy. But no, look, he was a goal kicker. He was a goal kicker and he kicked pretty well with that left arm in the air. So, I don't know, maybe around 50 or 55.
He was at the Dragons, though, so they might not be scoring too many tries. He may not be kicking too many goals, Mark Riddell. Let's leave it there, Tommy. Another great episode. Great to be here talking all things number 9. In summary, where are we going? Where are you thinking at the moment? As your team stands tonight, who are your 2 number 9s?
I'm sticking solid with Harry Grant. Not going to change there, I don't think. I've got Josh Hodgson at the moment, but that's very much up in the air.
Rightio, I think as it stands, I'm with Robson and Cheese. I'm happy to be with Robbo. I just think you're going to get value there. In terms of points, I'm hoping not too dissimilar to Harry Grant. I'm completely laying Damien Cook. Cheese, I could go without him, but I think as I sort of said at the top there, I think you're more risk of doing yourself more damage by playing without him than you are by playing with him. He is going to be very highly owned, as he is tonight, the third most owned player. You just have him there as a security blanket. You're not going to lose ground, I don't think, by having Brandon Smith in your team.
Yeah, I just wish he was a dual. If he was dual position, I would honestly have him, but that's the clincher for me. So I'm probably going to run without. But, there's 2 months left, so let's see.
Rightio. Very quickly before we do wrap this up, a big couple of days and weeks coming up, Tommy. What's next on the agenda? I think next time we catch up, we're going to be talking front row forwards and second row forwards.
Yeah, working our way down the SuperCoach grid, I guess. We've still got 8 weeks or so till the season, but that'll go very fast. Trials in a month or so we better get stuck into it.
We better. So stick around for that. As we say, you can catch all of that on the podcast or on YouTube if you're watching us here now. Head on over if you're not. Give us a look. A couple of graphics, we threw them up on the screen tonight, so you can check that out if you are watching us on YouTube. If you haven't, before you find us at SuperCoach365 on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe, and across the socials as well, at SuperCoach365. Until next time, Ryan and Tommy here, and we'll catch you then.